Hello and welcome to this download from Blackwell Online. My name is George Miller, and my guest today is Ziauddin Sardar, whose new book, Balti Britain, bears the subtitle, A Provocative Journey Through Asian Britain. Sardar was born in Pakistan, but has lived for over half a century in this country. He's a frequent commentator on religion, politics and ideas, both in the press and on radio and TV. In addition, he's the author of over 40 books, including the best-selling Why Do People Hate America? Balti Britain is a journey through the Asian experience of Britain, which reveals, among other things, that there is no such thing as a monolithic Asian experience. And it's also a journey back into his own past, and that of his family, and of the subcontinent. The book opens with Sardar in Birmingham's Balti Triangle, in pursuit of the dish's origins. Why, I asked, had he decided to start here?
First, because the history of Asian restaurants is essentially a history of Asians in Britain. But also, Balti represents a very, very specific form of transformation. It tells me that traditions reinvent themselves and then relocate themselves. So before Balti, most Asian restaurants were in fact regarded as really bottom of the pile. When I spoke to one of the inventors of Balti in Birmingham, in a place called Balti Triangle, he said to me that what would happen is that our restaurants will more or less be empty till by 11 o'clock. When the pubs close, everybody will come here and they will eat curry and drink lots of lager, right? And they will abuse the waiters. They will vomit all over the place. And basically, they had no really idea what they were drinking, what they were eating. It's basically just some generic curry. And he was pretty upset with that. So Balti was then invented as a specific form of authentic, if you like, dish that was located higher up the echelons, but also catered for the needs of the white British community. So I think it becomes a metaphor for renovation and change, but also a metaphor for fooling the whites, as it were. In a sense, it's a joke, because of course nobody cooks in a Balti. Balti is a pail that you carry water in. Normally in the subcontinent it will be the pail that you carry water into the toilet to flush the toilet, because if you don't have the flushing system, that's what you do. That's the main function of the Balti. So to have that kind of invent a Balti cuisine in that sense, I think was quite clever. But when I was researching the book, it's very interesting that when I went to these three people who claim to have invented Balti, and all of them are located in the Balti Triangle in Birmingham, all of them claim to have discovered it in Pakistan. So one person said to me that I went to Mirpur, where I'm from, and I went up north, and in Peshawar I came across people cooking in a Balti, and they actually called it a Balti. Now, this is not a totally unlikely scenario. It's not a totally unlikely scenario in the sense that poor people will find anything to cook in. So if they can't find saucepans, they will just put a Balti. Sometimes they will just cook in. Some people who are very, very poor, they will just cook in tins in that sense. So it's possible that he'd seen it. Another claimed that there was in fact a Balti tribe who lives in northwest of Pakistan. And I never heard of the Balti tribe. And in fact, it happens to be true that there is a Balti tribe that lives in the northwest frontier of Pakistan. So there is some connection that makes it authentic in inverted commas.
So it's a really good metaphor for what you're exploring in the book, which is this mixing of history and tradition and myth, and how things are commingled and overlaid and repackaged and represented, and that's kind of characteristic of the whole enterprise, isn't it?
Yeah. I think in a sense that people think of Asians as very regimented. We have this notion of Asian fatherhood who kind of dominates the family, and our lives are very, very structured. But what I'm trying to show is that the Asian life, in fact, is very messy and very complex, and all sorts of different things collide and come together. Myth, real history, history of the subcontinent, but also the history of Britain in subcontinent, and then the colonial history and the history that people have experienced here, plus layers and layers of cultures and lots of different identities. I think one of the interesting things that I have discovered when I was writing this book is that not just that Asians have multiple identities, but that they in fact thrive on multiple identities. Unlike most of my white friends who like to have a fixed notion of identity. The Asians kind of revel in multiple identities. And if you meet a Asian person, the first thing he will ask you is, where are you from? So you have to have three answers: Bangladesh, India, or Pakistan. That gives them a location. But it's not good enough to say I'm from Pakistan. Where in Pakistan? Well, I'm from Karachi. But which part of Karachi? I'm from Nazmabad. Which alley in Nazmabad? Right? Why? Is because that's how they kind of locate layers and layers of cultural identity. So if I am from Karachi, I could be a Muhajir, I could be a person who has migrated from India to Pakistan. But if I am from Punjab, I could be somebody who actually had a kind of ancestral connection to Punjab for hundreds of years. So knowing where people come from tells you a great deal about their history, about their culture, about their ethnicity.
And your own personal history is very much part of this exploration, isn't it? Looking at your own story, your family's story, and the story of your generation. Can you say a bit about how your own family came to be in this country?
The story basically goes is that my father used to work in a biscuit factory. He was a union leader in a place called Sahiwal, but in those days it was called Montgomery. And there was a strike at the biscuit factory, and my father led the strike, and that strike became very, very big. It started in the city, but then it became quite national, and that was 1957. And the following year, which was 1958, martial law came in power, and my father was told that he will be arrested. So he basically escaped and came to Britain, and that's what I kind of believe, that my father came here because he escaped, if you like, potential persecution. But in fact, there was a very deep connection. My father had a great reverence for Britain, for the Raj. And my own family's history is that I was very close to my grandfather from my mother's side. But I knew virtually nothing about my grandfather, my father's father. And nobody would actually talk about him. So we followed a couple of years later, and I remember, in fact, when we first came to Britain, it was a cold winter evening. It was raining. It was really, really miserable, and my father collected us, and we used to live in Hackney, in a place called Evering Road, where we had one room with all five of us living in that room, and we had a paraffin heater, and that was not what we thought of Britain. And the kind of racism that my father faced, which was pretty blatant. I mean, we had great problem in finding a place to stay, because nobody would actually rent us a room. You saw signs, no blacks, Asians, or dogs. And even in walking in the streets, you went and shopped in certain shops, and they will kind of treat you in a very specific way, and people will kind of change directions when they saw you coming. I mean, all these things, I I kind of noted, and that was not my idea of Britain, or certainly not my idea, my father's idea of Britain. And he became very, very disillusioned, in fact, with Britain. But what I did discover is that my father had a very strong connection with Britain, and that was due to his own father. Our family was traditionally, most of people in our family went into medicine. Most of them went into traditional medicine. So my maternal grandfather was a Hakim, he's an Islamic doctor. And he had a very specific understanding of Raj, because the colonial administrators were not very good about Hakims. They treated Hakims very, very badly. They banned Hikmat. So my maternal grandfather did not take very kindly to the Raj. But my father's father actually left home to become a doctor in the Western tradition. And the best way he thought of doing that was to actually join the army. So he joined the British Army, rose through the ranks, became a lieutenant general, fought in the Boxer Rebellion, fought in Afghanistan, and in fact was decorated. Now, I did not know all that history because it was hidden, because the family actually were not very happy that one of their kind of leading lights, if you like, was actually collaborated, if you like, with the British, while the rest of them were involved in the independence movement and so on and so forth. But just before my father died, I managed to get him to tell me a little bit about his own father. And what he actually told me was very small fragments. And after he died, I decided to look into it. And some of the things, for example, he said that my grandfather was decorated and had various initials after his name. things like OB, MB and all that, but the Indian equivalent.